Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I'll get started. We have a small group. Some folks may join while we're talking, but I know your time is valuable and I've got lots to talk about, so I thought I'd get started. I want to introduce myself again. Most of you have spoken to me already, but my name is Kelly Barth, and I work for Adoption Related Services as their Latvia Program Director. I'll be your moderator this evening for our webinar. Unfortunately, our director, Barbara Lorenzo, was unable to join us this evening. She always tries to be here, but she's currently taking her son off to college for the first time. I'll be talking about a number of different topics in regard to making an adoption plan from Latvia. If after our talk you would like to receive additional information or documents from us, please do not hesitate to ask. We can also send you additional resources for things like funding adoption grants and loans, home study agencies, and things like that. Just a reminder during the call, it would be wonderful if you could please mute your phone so there's no background noise and so that everyone can hear the call clearly. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thank you again for joining us this evening. We hope you've all had a wonderful summer, and we can see by your attendance on this call that you may be interested in making an adoption plan from Latvia. For those of you who have hosted children from Latvia this summer, we know how hard it must have been to send your kiddos home, and we hope that you can see them again very soon. Please know that we welcome clients from all of the various hosting programs who have worked within Latvia and currently represent families who have hosted through quite a few organizations. We would be honored to work with anyone listening to us tonight. For those of you who have not hosted a child, you will find the information tonight just as valuable. As I mentioned before, my name is Kelly Barth, and I thought I would start off a little bit about telling you about our agency. Adoption Related Services is a licensed, nonprofit, well-established adoption agency in good standing that has been in operation since 2006. We have been continuously Hague accredited since 2008 and have been accredited to work within the country of Latvia since 2009. Adoption Related Services is also a 501c3 organization, so know that any donations made to us on behalf of your adoption would be tax deductible to your benefactor. Based in Pennsylvania, we are able to work with clients located in all 50 states. We are also able to complete home study reports for families residing in the states of Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and my home study agency can also assist you with home study reports for Georgia and Tennessee families, but more on that later. Barbara Lorenzo, our agency director, is a licensed clinical social worker. She and her husband are the proud parents to two wonderful teenage boys who came to them through an adoption from Russia in 2002 when the boys were just 4 years old. She has worked with children and families for well over 20 years and has been in the adoption business for over 16 years. Throughout her career as a clinical social worker, Barbara has worked with families and children in a variety of settings, including protective service and foster care, special needs adoption, psychiatric rehabilitation, troubled youth, and since 2006 as the executive director of ARS. Barbara became aware of the plight of orphan children through her own adoption experience, and this is when she decided that it was her calling to help other families out with their own adoptions. A little bit about myself. My husband and I are also the proud parents of two children brought to us through adoption. Our son was adopted domestically as an infant from New York, and our daughter was adopted as an infant from Russia. They are now almost 20 and 22 years old. I have worked in international adoptions for 18 years now and have a vast background working in several different countries in Eastern Europe as well as in Guatemala. Additionally, I also own and operate a licensed home study agency which is based in Georgia where I live. My work with Latvia and my work with my home study agency are completely separate from each other unless you reside in Georgia or Tennessee, and I'm lucky enough to be able to assist you with the completion of your home study report. I tell you all of this because both Barbara and I have unique backgrounds in that we have also been involved in all facets of the adoption process for a long time now and have a lot of experience and knowledge that will be very beneficial to you during your own adoption process. Let me tell you a little bit more about how I became involved with adoptions from Latvia so that you can learn more about the person who would be guiding you through the entire adoption process should you decide to work with our agency. Back in 2007, the former director of one of the larger orphan hosting programs based here in Georgia had approached me and asked if I could assist their host families who were already adopting from Latvia with their dossier paperwork. I had already been working in international adoptions for almost 8 years at the time and had the experience needed to assist their host families with this process. At that time, you could adopt a child from Latvia independently, meaning that you could adopt a child without needing to work with an adoption agency. I happily accepted this offer and began assisting host families with their adoptions from Latvia. Then, in 2008, the United States ratified the Hague Treaty with regard to international adoptions, meaning that families could no longer adopt from Latvia unless they worked with a Hague-accredited adoption agency. I truly wanted to continue with this line of work as I've always found it to be so rewarding to help older children to find their forever families. So, I connected with Barbara Lorenzo at ARS so that we could work together to help bring children home from Latvia for adoption. Barbara had already been completing safety visits and home study reports for many of the Latvia host families located in Pennsylvania for several years, so she knew Latvia very well. Because we are both adoptive parents ourselves, I think our perspective is extremely helpful in that we have been in your shoes before and understand how important it is to you that your adoptions be completed as quickly and efficiently as possible. Also, I did want to express that even though we may not have the fanciest website, Facebook, or Twitter page, there is no one who is going to work harder for you than we will. Having worked in Latvia for over 10 years now, I think I can safely say that I've become quite knowledgeable about the adoption process, although there are certainly new things that I continue to learn each and every day. Barbara and I have a fantastic working relationship with our attorney in Latvia, as well as with the Ministry of Children's Welfare, who oversees adoptions in Latvia. As a matter of fact, in the summer of 2012, we were honored to have a representative from the Ministry of Children's Welfare, as well as our Latvian attorney, visit us here in the United States for 2 weeks. It was really wonderful to get to know them better. Here at ARS, we all work together as an amazing team and do all that we can to help complete this process for you as quickly as possible. As well, Diana, who is the attorney in Latvia for our agency, will often send families our way when she is approached by someone outside of the hosting programs who may be interested in adopting. This shows that she is very confident in our abilities as well. Should you decide to work with adoption-related services and myself, I would be your dossier and paperwork person and liaison throughout your entire adoption process, from the very beginning of the process until your child comes home and then some. I will assist you with every aspect of your adoption and will hold your hand as much or as little as you need. I can assure you that we will correspond an awful lot and get to know each other very well. Please know that Barbara and I are available to you at any time throughout your adoption process. Again, we are unique in that we are also adoptive parents ourselves. We've been in your shoes before and understand the excitement and the fears that you have about adoption. We understand the financial concerns you all have, as well as your sense of urgency in getting your adoption completed as quickly as possible. I think that this is a perspective that not many adoption agencies can offer. Also, we often work very long hours and can usually respond to your emails immediately, and if there is an emergency or an urgent matter to attend to, we will be here for you after hours as well if you need us. Many folks often find us catching up on work over the weekend as well. By now, most of you have probably heard of Dinah Rose, who is an incredible woman and attorney in Latvia. She is a dedicated advocate for our families as well as for the children of Latvia. Dinah works tirelessly well into the night when most people should be sleeping. Dinah has also had the experience of being an orphanage director herself many years ago. She is extremely well connected and well respected throughout Latvia. Dinah has another attorney, legal assistant, certified translators, and drivers available to assist you with your adoptions in Latvia. Besides having several social workers on staff to assist families with home study reports, ARS also has a very dedicated office staff as well. Sherry Perky has been with us since 2007, and many of you will get to know Sherry very well, as she will be the one sending and collecting required documents from you, typing up grant letters, invoicing you for services, and about a million other things. Sherry always has a smile on and is more than willing to help you with anything that you may need. Gail Schultz has been with us since 2014 and is our behind-the-scenes lady who helps to keep our vast amount of adoption paperwork in order. I wanted to now share a little bit of information about the country of Latvia. Latvia is officially known as the Republic of Latvia. Latvia is a country of over 2 million people, located in the Baltic region of Northern Europe, and is one of the 3 Baltic states. It is bordered by Estonia, Lithuania, Russia, and Belarus. Its capital city is Riga, and its currency is the euro. Latvia is a relatively stable democracy experiencing rapid economic growth, although their economy does continue to struggle in areas. Latvia is a very adoption-friendly country and has always supported international adoptions. Of the many countries I have worked with personally, Latvia is the only one who I feel would genuinely like to find forever families for their orphan children. In fact, Latvia will send out a list to adoption agencies 2 to 3 times per year with children who are available for adoption, with the hope that we may be able to help them find families for their orphan children. Latvia also maintains a website with listings of children who are available for adoption and has made the listing available in English. In Latvia, you will find that about half of their orphan children reside in orphanages and half reside in foster families. Although the official spoken language is Latvian, you will find that about half of the population also speaks Russian. Russia occupied Latvia for much of its history, and the Russian culture can still be felt there today. Next, I would like to talk a little bit more about the process of adopting a child from Latvia. Latvia itself is unique in that they are a very adoption-friendly country. As mentioned earlier, they have regularly sent out a list of children who become available for adoption and ask if the accredited agencies working within Latvia can help to find families for those children. We are not aware of any other country that does this. They truly try to do the best that they can in taking care of their children with their limited resources, and they are very supportive of the adoptive families. So Latvia has a relatively predictable adoption process, although you do always have to be prepared for the possibility of the unexpected with any international adoption. Before you begin the paperwork process to adopt a child from Latvia, please consider very carefully the plan that you have to incorporate this new child into your family. And I think that I skipped a page, so I'm going to go check. I apologize. I skipped the topics. I apologize. Up on the screen now are the topics that I do plan to cover through our talk this evening. There's a number of things I want to talk about, so it is going to be a little bit of talking. I hope that you guys don't mind. Let me head on back. Again, I'm so sorry. I'm not technically savvy, but I do well with other things. Okay, back to beginning the paperwork process. Please consider very carefully the plan that you have to incorporate your new child into your home and family. Remember that many of the children who have been in state care, particularly older children, come home with a history of trauma, abuse, and neglect, and as such will often require additional help and resources in order to assimilate them into your family and to help guide them to a brighter future. Adopting an older child is not easy and should not be taken lightly. Please be sure that you have the resources and the emotional ability to help your child to overcome some of the negative aspects of their past. Adopting older children with a past history of trauma is a challenge, and therapy is often needed and recommended, so please be open to that help if necessary. We have a lot of resources available to help you in this regard, so please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you feel that you need additional help for your family or for your child. Our help is always available to you, even well after your adoption has been completed. As well, many of you know that part of the home study process will require 10 hours of adoption training. Some states require even more than that. When you apply to us, we will also send you numerous resources and training articles that we ask you to please read through very carefully. Know that no matter how much you may read about the challenges of adopting an older child, it will still be a very different experience once the child is in your home for adoption versus how they were when they were with you for hosting. You may even see an entirely different child when they come home because they can start to let their guard down now that they have found a permanent forever family. It will take a lot of hard work to all come together as a family, so please be sure that you and your family are able to provide the time and dedication needed to have as smooth a transition as possible for your adoptive child and for your family. Once you decide to make an adoption plan, and if you wish to adopt a child who visited through an orphan hosting program, one of the first things we want to do is to try to verify that your host child is legally cleared for international adoption. Usually, your hosting program would have this information in their interview notes, and they would be very happy to answer this question for you. But If they are unsure or don't know, we can check on this by contacting our attorney in Latvia to see if she can get this information for you. But before we do so, please understand that you should be sure that adoption is definitely something you wish to pursue. The reason for this is that when our attorney calls a child's orphan court and asks about their legal status for adoption, this is a child's private information, and the courts can sometimes get upset with her if they feel that the inquiry about a child was not a serious one toward adoption. Both we and the courts want to spare the child any disappointment they may feel if you should later decide that making an adoption plan is not right for your family. In some cases, the child may already know that you have asked about adopting them, and you may wonder how this could be. Oftentimes, the orphans court may inform the orphanage director or foster family that an inquiry is made about the child, and the inquiry is then passed along to the child. While we do not agree with this approach, it can happen. This is another reason to try and be as sure as possible that your intention is to adopt, because your child would be very saddened if you did not come for them. Please also note that it can sometimes take several weeks for our attorney to obtain this information from the court, as some courts are simply more responsive than others. We know it is really hard to have to wait to learn this information, but do know that we are doing all that we can to get this information for you as quickly as possible. In order for our attorney to inquire about a child's legal status for adoption, we would need their full name, date of birth, region they reside in, orphans court they are assigned to, and the name of their orphanage or foster family. We provide an updated list of children to inquire about to our attorney daily once the host children have returned to Latvia. As well, we know that many of you would like to know if your host child wants to be adopted before starting the adoption process, as this only makes sense. In order to make this request, Latvia wants to see that the family has already hosted their child and has made a commitment to adopting this child by either starting a home study report or by sending in an application to their adoption placing agency. If you should decide to work with ARS for your adoption, then we would be considered to be your placing agency. This way, the courts know that the inquiry about one of their children is a serious one toward adoption. Again, the court wants to be sure you understand that if one of their children is asked if they would like to be adopted into your family, and the child says yes to that, the child would be devastated if you were later to change your mind about adopting them. This can also affect the future of adoptions from Latvia, as well as affect the court's willingness to discuss information about particular children going forward, so we do take this seriously. Our attorney does the best that she can in trying to get these questions answered for you, but we are finding now that many of the orphans courts will not allow their children to be asked about adoption until the family has an approved dossier in Latvia. The reason for this is because there have been several families over the years who have made a verbal commitment to their host child about adoption and then have not followed through with an adoption plan. This devastates the child and angers the court, as you might imagine. So again, we will try to get this information answered for you as well, but we cannot promise that the court will comply with this request and allow the child to be spoken to about adoption. We realize that this puts you in a very difficult position, one that we will do all we can to help you work through. If you have not previously hosted a child and are considering going straight to an adoption plan from Latvia for what is considered to be a blind referral, then once your dossier arrives in Latvia, it is approved by the Ministry of Children's Welfare, and as soon as a child becomes available for adoption who meets the age and gender parameters of the child you wish to adopt, we are sent the child's referral information to forward on to you. Your referral information will also include a picture of the child. In this case, the referral may take a little longer depending upon the parameters of the child you hope to adopt. Once you receive your referral, you are given an opportunity to ask important questions about the child that you would need to know before you accept the referral for adopting that child. The remainder of the adoption process would be the same regardless of whether you hosted your prospective adoptive child or if you adopted a child referred to you directly by the ministry. Once you make the decision to formally move forward with an adoption plan, you will want to send an application into the adoption agency with whom you would like to work. Each agency needs to have an application on file for any clients they are working with, as the application gives us consent to work with your home study agency, with immigration, and so forth. The next thing to do for your adoption would be to engage the services of a Hague-accredited home study agency in your state to begin your home study report. I will also assist you with locating an agency in your state and will work closely with them during the completion of your report to make sure that it meets both immigration and Latvia's guidelines. I will also provide you with a list of questions to ask the home study agencies as you call them to help you make a decision about with whom to work for your report. Once you have hired a home study agency, I would then send them additional information that they need in order to complete your report. Please be sure that you have signed on with a placement agency, such as ARS, before your home study report is issued, as it must first be approved by that agency. The home study process will typically take approximately 8 to 10 weeks with most agencies. Barbara and I can complete the reports for you more quickly if you are able to work with us for the home study and reside in one of the 4 states mentioned earlier. The home study process will entail meetings with your home study agency social worker, collecting numerous documents, completing criminal background checks, a medical exam, employment verifications and financials, and the completion of a minimum of 10 hours of Hague-approved adoption training. The home study report is also an opportunity for one-on-one time with your social worker who will begin to train you on the challenges of adopting an older child into your home and how to help your new child work through some of the early childhood trauma and neglect that they may have suffered. Once your home study report has been completed, you will file your paperwork with U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services, also known as USCIS. At this point, you will be seeking immigration approval to bring an orphan child into the U.S. to reside here with you permanently. The form that you will file for this is called the I-800 form. The main component of the I-800 form is your home study report. You will also be fingerprinted by USCIS. Your immigration approval typically arrives 6 to 8 weeks after filing the I-800A form. As a side note, anyone who may be interested in adopting a child who will be turning 16 during the adoption process must file this form before the child's 16th birthday, or they will age out and no longer be eligible for an international adoption. There are several additional parameters for 16-year-olds, so please contact me directly if this applies to you, and we can discuss these at length. Children can be adopted up to the age of 18 if they are also being adopted along with a sibling under the age of 16, and if the adoption can be finalized in Latvia before the child's 18th birthday. After the I-800A form is filed, we will begin the process of preparing your dossier for Latvia. A dossier is a legalized set of documents required by the Ministry of Children's Welfare and the local orphans court in Latvia, describing and approving you as an adoptive family. All documentation in your dossier must be legalized at the highest level in the United States. This is called apostilling your paperwork. Once your dossier has been sent to Latvia, it is then submitted for translation, which can take about 2 to 4 weeks. After translation and immigration approval on your I-800A form, your dossier is brought to the Ministry of Children's Welfare for review and approval. The ministry will then initiate the process of having the local orphans court verify that your child wishes to be adopted. This is done by having your child's court-appointed social worker go out to speak with the child to see if they want to be adopted into your family. If they say yes, and they have not already been cleared for international adoption, a court hearing will then be scheduled to do that. Finally, a special interest hearing will also be scheduled by the court to be sure the court feels that adopting the child into your family specifically is in the best interest of the child. Once the orphans court holds these 2 hearings and sends the results of each back to the Ministry of Children's Welfare, you will receive an official referral from the ministry with additional health and social background information on your prospective adoptive child. This referral is sent to us, and we will pass it along to you. The referral will also likely include some information as to why the child is in state care and whether or not they have any immediate biological family. Barbara then does a fantastic job at explaining to you the medical information contained within your child's referral, as well as pointing out any areas of concern. If you have questions that are critical to your decision to move forward with the adoption of the child you are referred, This would be the time to ask those questions of the ministry, and they will investigate and formally provide you with answers within a week or two. Once you decide to accept the referral of your child, about a week later, you will be formally invited by Latvia to begin the adoption process. The ministry will send on to us what is called your letter of invitation. We will forward the letter of invitation on to you once it is received. Once our attorney sees the letter of invitation, she can go to the local orphans court and ask for your official travel dates. You are usually invited to go to Latvia about 3 to 4 weeks after accepting your referral. From the time you submit an approved dossier to the Ministry of Children's Welfare until the time you travel on your first trip is typically about 3 to 4 months, provided your child's paperwork is all in order in Latvia. Sometimes there can be a holdup with your official referral on the Latvian side if your prospective adoptive child has not been completely cleared for both domestic and international adoption. Adoption is a two-part process in Latvia, and the child has to be cleared for domestic adoption first, and then they have to be cleared by the court to be adopted internationally. This second court hearing is merely a formality and nothing to worry about, but it is often not initiated until there is a dossier in Latvia to adopt the child. For blind referrals, for example, all children who have not been identified through hosting, all of these steps have already been taken care of prior to the receipt of your referral. You will be making 3 trips to Latvia to complete the adoption process. The first trip is for your first court hearing and the completion of the required bonding period under Latvian adoption law. This bonding period is necessary before the court will allow your child to leave Latvia with you. This court hearing is also an opportunity for you to legally change your child's name if you and the child should decide to do so. This first trip to Latvia typically lasts an average of about 2 to 3 weeks if you have hosted your child. With hosting, you are already considered to have started the bonding period with your child. The only exception to this is the region of Riga, where the first trip is a minimum of 3 weeks long, even if you have hosted your child. If you have not hosted the child you plan to adopt, you will be required to stay in Latvia longer to get to know your child under the guidance of the court. This can potentially add up to 1 week to that first trip. In both cases, please add on 2 additional days to this first trip if you plan to bring your child home with you, as you will need this time to obtain your child's visitor's visa. The visitor's visa allows the child to return to the U.S. and stay with you for the remainder of the adoption process. As just mentioned, the length of your first trip is Latvia's required bonding period under their adoption law, and the length of this bonding period is entirely up to your judge to determine. So unfortunately, we do not have any control over the exact amount of time that you will be away. Both adoptive parents, if applicable, must be present for this first trip, and your adoptive child will stay with you while you are in Latvia. You will go before the judge at the beginning and then again at the end of this trip, and you will be visited by a court-appointed social worker 1 to 3 times in between. The social worker will give a written report back to the judge as to how you and your child are bonding with each other. At the end of your trip, when you go before the judge a second time, you may then request that the judge permit you to bring your child back to the U.S. with you while you complete the remainder of the adoption process. It is not a requirement to bring your child home after the first trip, but it is an option available to you and one that we strongly recommend, if possible, as it allows for a longer bonding period and allows your child to get better acquainted with the English language and with their new life in America. After this first trip, you will come home and file additional immigration paperwork called the I-800 form. The I-800 form identifies the specific child you are adopting to immigration, and you will wait for the second approval from them in order to move forward with the remainder of the adoption process. After the I-800 form approval is received, there is one more form to file called the DS-260 form, which will automatically initiate your child's Social Security number once your adoption has been completed. The Social Security number will be sent to you a couple of months after you are home from trip 3. A few weeks after you arrive home from your first trip, you will ask your home study agency to visit your home and produce what we call a hosting report that you will bring back with you to Latvia on your second trip. This report will detail for the judge how your child is doing in your home during the adoption process or the bonding period. This report is called a hosting report because you are considered to be hosting your child between the first and the third trip of the adoption process. Of course, I will prompt you for all of these things at the appropriate times. Your child will be coming home with you on the same visitor's visa that they came here with for the hosting program. Please note, if you're bringing your child home from Latvia after the first trip, their visitor's visa does not allow them to be enrolled in any school full-time, whether it be public or private. However, they are permitted to audit up to 18 hours of classroom study per week, provided they are not earning any school credit. Know that your local school system will accept your child regardless of their immigration status, but the U.S. Embassy does not allow your child to attend school on a full-time basis while they are here on a visitor's visa. Your second trip to Latvia occurs approximately 3 to 4 months after the first. The appearance at your second court hearing is when your adoption will be considered to be finalized in Latvia. Once your adoption is finalized in Latvia, it cannot be reversed. Only one adoptive parent and any child aged 12 years and older must travel back to Latvia on the second trip. Any child under the age of 12 can remain home. You will typically spend 3 days in Latvia as you leave to come back home the day after you appear in court. After the second court hearing, there is a mandatory 20-day waiting period, and then an adoption decree and a new birth certificate will be produced by the court for your child. These documents will be translated and given to you on your third trip. Your third and final trip to Latvia will occur approximately 6 to 8 weeks after the second trip and is your required embassy appointment where you will obtain an immigrant visa for your child. Only one adoptive parent and all adoptive children, regardless of their age, must travel back to Latvia on this third trip. This trip typically lasts 5 days in Latvia, as there is a required embassy interview, medical exam, new passport, and additional documentation that must be completed. The reason that this trip occurs so much later after trip 2 is because, as mentioned earlier, Latvia requires a mandatory 20-day waiting period before your child's new birth certificate and adoption decree can be issued. Both of these documents are needed for your embassy appointment on trip 3. When you arrive back to the United States after this third trip, your child will now be considered to be a U.S. citizen. A Social Security number will automatically be generated for your child as well. All children over the age of 14 will have the additional task of appearing at a swearing-in ceremony with immigration a couple of months after they come home. U.S. Immigration will notify you by letter of when the swearing-in ceremony will occur. Please note that unfortunately there have recently been tremendous delays with the scheduling of the swearing-in ceremony. One of the most common questions we are asked all of the time is, how long will it take to complete my adoption? That is a hard question to answer because each and every adoption experience is completely different from the next. There are so many variables to consider that it is truly hard to predict. Our best guesstimate on the time to complete an adoption right now would be approximately 10 to 12 months from the very start of your home study report process to arriving home after your third trip, if there are no unforeseen glitches and if you can complete your paperwork quickly. Also, do keep in mind that some regions within Latvia simply work more quickly than others, and this can affect your timeline as well. Our attorney will do all that she can to assist you with a speedy adoption, but do keep in mind that as an attorney, she can only legally represent you for your adoption. She cannot make the court move more quickly than the court wants to move, and this can sometimes feel frustrating to adoptive parents. Just think about how the court systems work here in the United States. Attorneys do not have the authority to sit court hearings, and it's no different in Latvia. But truly, there is no attorney who is better, more respected, or more well-connected than Dinah Rose is. So know that your case is being handled by the very best attorney there is in Latvia. Once your adoption has been completed, we would ask that you please make copies of all your final documents that you brought home from Latvia and send them to us for your file. Also, if you have not already done so, you will want to schedule a full medical and dental examination of your child to get a baseline reading of any issues that may need to be taken care of now that your child is covered under your medical insurance plan. We would recommend that your child initially be seen by an international adoption specialist who is experienced and trained with seeing children adopted from other countries who may have resided in an institution. We will have provided you with a list of these specialists at the time of your official referral. As well, you will want to have an educational assessment of your child completed in their native language to get an approximate baseline of the grade they would be studying in school, and then you can be advised of any learning challenges that your child may have. Your local public school system can assist you with scheduling this assessment and will provide your child with any services that are needed to ensure their success in school. As mentioned earlier, a Social Security number will automatically be generated for your child, as you will have been instructed to complete this process during your adoption by filing the DS-260 form mentioned earlier. Once their Social Security number is received, you will want to apply for your child's U.S. passport. Next, you may want to consider the process of readopting your child in your state. Not all states require that you readopt your child within your state. However, we will strongly urge you to get this done. Readopting your child is also called the domestication of a foreign adoption, and it will grant your child a U.S.-issued birth certificate that will be entitled Certificate of Foreign Birth. Most states will allow you to initiate the readoption process on your own without the assistance of an adoption attorney. Why is this important, you may ask? If you were ever to lose or misplace your child's Latvian birth certificate, it cannot be replaced. Readopting your child in the U.S. ensures that your state's Vital Records Office will always have a copy of their birth certificate on file. Finally, you will also be completing a 1- and 2-year post-adoption report that will be due in Latvia on the 1- and 2-year anniversaries of your second trip. These reports allow Latvia to see how your child is doing in your home. This report is completed by your home study agency exactly the same way as the hosting report you had completed after coming home from your first trip. Please be aware of the tremendous importance of completing these reports after your adoption. Failure to do so can impact adoptions for future families. As well, Latvia has recently begun reporting families who are delinquent with these reports to the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Embassy, and nobody wants that to happen. One of the reasons that these reports are so important to Latvia is because your child will be retaining dual citizenship until at least 18 years of age. So Latvia still considers your child to be a citizen of Latvia. Because we know this is a critical component in making a decision to adopt from Latvia, we'd also like to talk to you about the cost of your adoption. We believe in preparing you completely for this process, and that contrary to what you may learn through other adoption sources, it is highly improbable that you would be able to complete the entire adoption process for less than $35,000 total for the adoption of one child. Remember that a large part of your adoption costs are for the airfare required to complete your 3 trips to Latvia. Thus, if you're able to get SkyMiles donated to you, this will help greatly reduce your overall adoption expenses. The fee schedule that we have already sent to some of you lists all of the fees for your adoption from soup to nuts. When we state that total costs for the adoption of one child are approximately $35,000 to $37,000, we are including everything from the start of your home study report down to the last postage stamp and long-distance phone call that you would make for your adoption. To lighten that heavy blow just a little bit, ARS is currently waiving the $300 application fee for new families to help with some of the stress of these adoption costs. Also, the vast majority of you will qualify to receive the adoption tax credit once your adoption has been finalized. The adoption tax credit means that in the year that you complete your adoption, for example in 2017, you will receive $13,570 per child back from the federal government when you file your federal income taxes. We will discuss a little more about this in just a minute. There are also numerous organizations who are offering adoption grants, and we can send you a list of these sources as well. Remember that other people can make tax-deductible donations on your behalf to help lower your adoption costs. We have had quite a few of our families fundraise for their entire adoption costs. We have been told that some sources are quoting adoption costs as low as $25,000 for your total adoption expenses for the adoption of one child. We do not feel that this is an accurate representation, and again, we would much rather honestly prepare you for this process than to throw out a dollar amount that we do not feel is accurate just to sway you to work with us. Please be aware that the only difference in fees between us and some of the other adoption agencies recommended to you is in regard to the agency fee itself, and this is minimal. We use the same attorney in Latvia as another adoption agency who may be referred to you. So besides the agency fees, every other expense for your adoption would be the same regardless of which agency you choose. Your choice with whom to work will come down to preference, reputation, availability, and efficiency. We would welcome you to please check many references and talk to lots of other adoptive families about their experiences and their total adoption expenses before making a final decision with whom to work. We would much rather be completely honest with you about the costs and have you be prepared for that than to try to win you over by quoting lower costs, only for you to find out later on that that wasn't realistic, and then you're left scrambling trying to find additional financial resources. As well, the Hague Treaty requires that all adoptive families be treated the same. Some agencies state that they are offering a discounted fee when in actuality it is simply an increased fee in order to be able to offer you a quote discount. Please carefully review any fee schedules that you are given and focus on the total actual agency fee itself, as all the other costs associated with your adoption will be relatively the same between the agencies you may have been referred to by your hosting programs. We would also like to mention that we have a bank account set up for our attorney here in the U.S. so that you will have limited amounts of cash that you will have to carry with you on your trips to Latvia. We are able to deposit your in-country costs directly into her account for you. Carrying large amounts of cash to Latvia has always been of concern to our families, and we just wanted you to know that you will not have to worry about that with our agency. There are many options available to you to assist you with your adoption expenses. As mentioned earlier, one of the most important to point out is the adoption tax credit. The adoption tax credit is a permanent tax credit under the Hope for Children Act that currently stands at $13,570 per child for any adoption completed during the 2017 calendar year. What this means is that when you file your taxes in the year in which your adoption was finalized, you will get back up to $13,570 per child in federal taxes that you have already paid into the government. This will come to you as a refund, provided your combined family income is below the maximum allowed. You are not able to get back more money than you have paid in federal taxes. So if you cannot take the full credit the first year, you can roll over any used tax credit to the following year until you can receive the entire amount back. The adoption tax credit typically increases a couple of $100s per year, so since all of you will be finalizing adoption next year, your actual tax credit will be slightly higher per child. Also note that there are many other resources for obtaining monies toward your adoption expenses, and we have a very comprehensive list of these resources contained in our information packet. We would like to cover a few more points of interest now. Please note that the current adoption rules in Latvia state that there must be a minimum of 18 years age difference between the prospective adoptive child and both adoptive parents. Recently enacted adoption legislation has opened this rule up to being challenged if the prospective adoptive parents can show that there is a close familial bond to the child they hope to adopt. To date, we have had several exceptions granted to this age requirement rule. In these cases, the adoptive parents were close to the 18-year age difference and had hosted their child on 2 separate occasions, showing Latvia that there was a clear familial emotional bond between the prospective adoptive parents and the child. Our attorney has advised that in some courts in Latvia, they are refusing to make any exceptions to this 18-year age rule. So each challenge to this new rule must be considered on a case-by-case basis. Also note that the Ministry of Children's Welfare has advised that they will not consider approving any adoption where there is less than 16 years age difference between the prospective adoptive parents and the adoptive child. Also note that after each hosting program, Latvia requests that each adoption agency provide to them a list of children who have been hosted and who will be adopted either by their host family or by a family they met during hosting. This list is called the Ministry List and must be sent to the Ministry of Children's Welfare within 30 days of the end of the hosting program. The Ministry of Children's Welfare is the main government body in Latvia that oversees adoptions. So, theoretically, if your prospective adoptive child is on this list, the ministry would then notify our attorney should a family from another country wish to adopt your host child, or if another hosting program wishes to include your host child in their next hosting program. This will be to give you priority because you have already established an emotional bond with your child. Know that Latvian citizens will always be given priority when it comes to adopting one of their children, regardless of how many times you may have hosted the child. But once your adoption process has formally started within Latvia, they are considered to be your child and other foreign families may not adopt them. In regard to this ministry list, if you decide that you would like to work with our agency for your adoption, please send me an email as soon as possible expressing your desire to have your host child placed on the ministry list. Please only place your child on the ministry list if you are 110% committed to completing an adoption plan for that child, because once a child is placed on that list, they lose the opportunity to be adopted by another family or to participate in another hosting program, which would not be fair to them should you be unable to complete the adoption process. The information that I need from you for the ministry list is your last name, the hosting program you hosted through, the child's full name, date of birth, region they reside in, orphans court they are assigned to, and the name of their orphanage or foster family. We would also like to take a minute to address the ability to have contact with your prospective adoptive child once they return to Latvia after hosting. First, let me explain a little bit about the rules of the Hague Treaty, which oversees adoptions from Latvia by U.S. citizens. According to the rules of the Hague Treaty, there is not supposed to be any contact between the prospective adoptive parents, the orphanage, the foster family in Latvia, and the child they are adopting during the adoption process, unless permission for that contact has been granted by the central authority in Latvia, in this case, the Ministry of Children's Welfare. However, we do realize that it would be difficult to ask any family to cut off all contact with their prospective child once they return to Latvia after hosting. Because this issue has become so sensitive in Latvia, we would ask that all contact with your host child be kept light in nature until your dossier has been submitted to the ministry for approval. For example, when speaking with your host child, feel free to talk about how their day was, how school was, how they're feeling, and things like that. But please do not discuss adoption in any way, shape, or form, even if your host child brings it up. Once your dossier is actually at the ministry, you can then freely discuss your adoption plans with your prospective adoptive child. Also, please do not discuss fees associated with your adoption with anyone in Latvia. The talk of money and expenses can be misunderstood due to cultural differences and can cause an uproar in Latvia where adoptions are technically free to Latvian citizens. As well, please do not make any promises to your host child or say anything that can be perceived as persuading your host child toward adoption. The courts in Latvia have become increasingly upset with host families who maintain close contact with their host child after hosting, so it is very important to keep any conversations with your host child light in nature and steer clear of any talk about adoption. Also, please be very careful about any information that you give or receive from your host child's caregivers. Many times, the information that they give to you, although given with the best of intentions, is often inaccurate. Only our attorney is able to get accurate information about any particular adoption situation. Please also note that our attorney would be unable to verify every piece of information that may be provided to you by your child's orphanage or foster family, as this takes a lot of time away from her legal responsibilities. Just know that she is on top of your case and will do all that she can to get you to Latvia as quickly as possible. And do keep in mind that according to Hague rules, once again, it would be inappropriate to ask your child's caregivers specific personal questions about your child or about their adoption status. Just please be careful. Although it would be best to not have contact with anyone in Latvia during the adoption process, we do realize that this may not be realistic for host families in particular. Also, keep in mind that anything that you post online in any capacity can and will make its way back to Latvia and could affect your ability to adopt, as well as affect the adoptions of families that come after you. This brings us to the topic of Facebook. There is no doubt that there is a wealth of wonderful information being posted and shared on Facebook about Latvian adoptions, and the families on there are of great support to each other. But do remember that when you read information posted online, that every adoption case is different from each other, and sometimes cases have to be moved along more quickly than others due to a child's medical needs or because they are aging out for adoption. Also, be aware of the importance of not posting personal information about your prospective adoptive child online in any forum. Even private groups are not private, and Latvia has found some information posted about their children that has caused them to get quite upset. Until your adoption is finalized in Latvia after your second trip, your child's information is private, so please protect it. This includes not posting pictures or the names of your prospective adoptive child online until after your adoption is finalized on trip 2. Also, again, please be careful that any information you post online is not going to upset Latvia because they often do find out what you are saying online. Always keep in mind that comments online can be misinterpreted or misunderstood in a foreign language. Online postings have created some issues within the orphanages and the courts once they get wind of them, and this can create issues for your adoption. We thank you for understanding that. Up on your screens now is a quick list of facts in regard to adoption from Latvia. Please take a moment to look through the list of items, and please let me know at the end of the talk if there's anything on there that you would like me to expand upon. That about wraps up a summary of the adoption process from Latvia. I would also like to give you my direct phone number in case you have any questions later on. My direct phone number is 770-514-7324. You may also email me at kb@adoption-related-services.org. You can also reach out to our director, Barbara Lorenzo, directly at 717-227-9560. If you would like, I would be happy to send you an information packet that we hope will also help to answer some of your questions, as well as provide you with additional information about us, fees, adoption grants and financing information, an application, and references for our agency. Please call or email me and I can get you that sent out to you right away. Also, don't forget to let the agency you hire know if you would like your child to be placed on the ministry list for children who are being adopted by their host family. We also plan to post this talk on YouTube, so if you would like the link to that once it is up, please email me and let me know so I can send that to you. While we open this talk up to questions now, please enjoy some photos of some of our families who have adopted children from Latvia. I'll run through some of the photo pages and then I will be able to look at any questions that have been typed in. But for right now, does anyone have any questions that they would like for me to answer? You can unmute your phone if you'd like to ask me a question. I don't know if there are no questions or just that maybe I can't hear you, but I don't hear anybody. So I pray to goodness it's just that there's no questions. Oh,
Kelly,
yes. Hi.
this is David Adams. I just had a question concerning separation of siblings.
Sure.
We hosted 2 children. They have a brother who's older, and he's probably not adoptable. He's in a facility for criminal behavior of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
But we were interested in adopting the boy, but the girl has no interest in being adopted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how we can, how difficult it's going to be to get a sibling separated, particularly in this case.
Right.
I guess the girl would want to sabotage the boy being adopted.
Oh.
She does not want to lose him.
Oh, I mean, I'll be honest, that's a tough situation. A few months ago, Latvia sent out notice through our attorney that they were not going to consider the separation of siblings any longer going forward because there have been lots of issues with the separation of siblings. But within the local orphans courts, they sometimes have a different take on that. So it's really up to the local orphans court as to whether or not they would allow the siblings to be separated legally for adoption. The problem in your situation may be that the siblings who are being separated from each other have to agree to be separated from each other. So if she is holding steadfast that she will not allow it, the court may not allow that to happen. The only way we would know, honestly, is just to see if Dinah can speak to the orphans court and explain the situation and see how the court feels about it. We may be surprised and the court may say, that's totally okay, he deserves the opportunity of a family, or the court may say, we can't separate them. But we can find that out. Typically, we can find that out before you begin any kind of adoption process, before you start spending any money on this. But again,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question. My wife has a question.
Sure.
Kelly, this is Vicki Adams. Do I understand correctly that in a sibling set, all siblings have to agree for one sibling to be separated out for adoption?
No, it's not. They don't all have to agree in terms of the siblings who may be adults. Is that what you're talking about, or in other institutions?
Well, in this case, the child we want to adopt is 9.
Right.
The other siblings are 11 and 15.
Right. So the siblings that are legally tied to each other, those are the siblings that have to agree to be separated from each other. If they have a 22 and a 24-year-old sister, let's say, they're not legally tied to them anymore because they've already reached the age of majority. So you're worried just about the siblings that they're legally tied to. So in your case, probably those 3, although if the one brother is in an institution for criminal activity, and sometimes children are in mental institutions, in those cases, then the courts typically don't ask for their opinion, let's put it that way, because they probably would separate them legally anyway to allow the other kiddos to have a chance at a family. But again, it's really, I mean, honestly, it's really a case-by-case thing. We've seen a whole bunch of scenarios in this situation, any number of different ways. So it's probably something I'd really rather have the attorney ask in Latvia, ask the orphans court, just to see what their take on it is, you know?
Okay, thank you.
You are very welcome. Are there any other questions? And I'll get to the ones in the chat window in just a second.
We have a question.
Sure.
This is David and Laura Goat, and we hosted a child this summer And we know through the hosting agency that he is not available for adoption right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting for his court date in October.
Okay.
If his mom is going to show up to sign over her parental rights.
Mm-hmm.
He has been in this particular orphanage for about 4 years. And so our question is basically, if she doesn't show up to sign her rights over,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that we can do to override that, or what?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have any right as U.S. citizens to try to override or challenge something like that. So the process has to work itself out the way it legally has to work itself out in Latvia. So what that means is the birth parents are notified of a court hearing to terminate parental rights. If the birth parents don't show up to that court hearing, most courts will grant them a second opportunity to come. So they'll be notified of the second one. If they don't show up for the second hearing, then typically the court will begin the process to formally terminate their rights. So they don't get 3 tries at not showing up at court. Where it could get a little bit sticky, though, would be if the birth parents are told that there's a court hearing to terminate rights, but they try to fight that decision and want to retain parental rights, they're going to be given a period of time in which to show that they've been rehabilitated enough to be able to parent the child. So Latvia may say, okay, you would like to get your parental rights back. We'll revisit this in 3, 4, 5 months. Show us in that period of time what you've done to change your lifestyle so that you can be a successful parent.
Okay.
So let's say there's that second court hearing and they haven't rehabilitated themselves. Then again, the court begins the process to terminate rights. They will then officially terminate parental rights. After the court hearing that officially terminates parental rights, there is then a 30 to 45-day appeals period after the court hearing. And again, during that appeals period, somebody can show up and say, well, I want to appeal the court's decision. If they're successful, they may be granted a hearing. If they're not, the 45 days goes by, the verdict is rendered permanent, and the child can then be cleared for adoption.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions out there verbally while you look at all these cute kiddos I have up on the screen?
Kelly, this is Vicki Adams again. What is your opinion about trying to adopt a child and rehost them during the Christmas holidays this year?
Oh, families do that all the time. Adoptive families in the process of adopting, they almost always, if it's financially feasible, they almost always will host the child at the next hosting if they're not yet at the point of being able to bring the child home. So it's perfectly okay to do that. Is that the kind of opinion you were asking for, or did you just want to know what I thought about it?
Yes, I want to know what you thought about it, and that's helpful. It's related to the question I posted in the chat, which is about communication with the child post-hosting.
Right.
All of it seems kind of confusing. I don't know whether we're supposed to stay in touch with the child or stay away from the child or not.
Yeah. You've got a lot of really good questions within your question there, so I'm going to try to answer 2 of the bigger ones. So in terms of hosting the child again during your hosting process, I will always recommend doing that because, especially with the younger kiddos, when they go back to Latvia, sometimes it's a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. And if it's 6, 7, 8 months before their social worker comes to them and says, hey, the Adams family wants to adopt you, what do you think about that? If they haven't seen you in a long time, they may hesitate and ponder their answer to that question. But if you can continue hosting them, you keep that bond going. It remains strong, if that makes sense. So the children can easily have their answer when they're asked that question about being adopted. In terms of maintaining the contact with the child, the rules of the Hague Treaty say that you can't continue contact with them unless the country says it's okay. Well, in Latvia's case, Latvia asks that the host families keep in touch with not only the children, but their caregivers in Latvia while they're here for hosting. So Latvia is already allowing that level of contact. So to continue that contact is okay, and that's what I meant by saying keeping the conversations light in nature. You know, how are you doing today? How was school? What'd you think of that snowstorm? That kind of thing. So that contact is okay. They don't get upset by that. When Latvia gets upset is when adoptive families start talking about adoption before they're even cleared for adoption, or if they start making promises to the child like, hey, if you allow us to adopt you, we'll take you to Disney World. So you can't be seen as persuading the child in any way. So just keeping those conversations light in nature is perfectly okay. Just don't talk about adoption until that dossier is actually at the ministry. Then you can be open in your conversation. Is that helpful?
Okay. That was a great answer. Thank you for answering that.
You're very welcome. No problem. I'm not sure how many pages of pictures I have. Wow, I got lots of pictures. Any other questions before I minimize the pictures? And see what's in the chat box? Okay. It's in the chat box. Oh, I just answered your question. Okay, let me see. Are there any other questions in the chat box? Do biological children generally go to Latvia on the first or subsequent trips? That is entirely up to the adoptive family. Biological children are not required to travel to Latvia for any of the adoption trips, so they don't have to. If it's financially feasible, it's probably a pretty awesome opportunity for them to get to see the country where their brother or sister has come from. But the first trip is probably not the best trip to take them on, because 3 weeks in a foreign country where you don't understand the language and you can't watch television and McDonald's doesn't taste the same as it does at home and all of that good stuff is not going to be fun for your biological children. So if you wanted them to see Latvia, I would probably consider taking them on the second or third trip. But again, it's not required. Okay. Any other questions from anyone while we're here? No? Maybe? Everybody good? Okay, well, if there are no additional questions, then I want to thank you all sincerely for joining us tonight and letting me take up some of your time. I'm sorry if I messed up the PowerPoint there for a minute. Technology is not my friend, but I'm really good at all the other stuff that you need from me. Email me with any questions or feel free to give me a call. I'd be more than happy to talk to you personally about any situations or any questions that you may have. Again, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope to get to talk to all of you again soon. Good night.